Great-grandpa outlived pretty much everybody he ever loved. His first wife killed herself young. The two kids they had together killed themselves young. One of his son-in-laws killed himself young. And then his other son-in-law ended up getting murdered. So for the rest of his life, he was really just stuck with my uncle who was in prison. And then my mom and her three kids, which were me, my sister, and our younger brother. And I remember the last time we got to see him, we had gone to his house for a visit. And I had gotten up to go to the bathroom. And when I walked down the hall, I noticed on the wall, he had a picture of me, my sophomore year, hanging up. And then next to me was a picture of my sister. And then next to her was a picture of our brother. And then after we left that day, we never got to see him alive again because he had dementia and he had gotten really violent. So my mother didn't want us around him anymore. And then after he finally passed away, we had to go back and clean out his house. And I went down that hallway and I noticed that he had taken down the pictures of my brother and my sister, but he still had the picture of me up, smack dab right in the middle of that wall, like some sort of trophy. And I used that against my siblings for the next 16 years. I would bring up about how I was grandpa's favorite and he always kept my photo up, but he took their picture down and only hung it up whenever we were in town. And then on Christmas, my siblings came over to celebrate and I decided to retell the story so that my kids could hear it because I named both of them after my grandpa. And when I'm done telling the story, my mom looks at me and she's like, you know, that's not what happened, right? And then she explained that after my grandpa's dementia got so bad, he started forgetting people's existence. He walked down that hallway and he saw strangers hanging on his wall. And so he started having panic attacks. So his caretaker had to take down the pictures of my brother and my sister. But when he looked at the picture of me, he saw Eva, his first wife, who blew her brains out in front of him. So instead of my picture being left up because I was his favorite, it was actually left up because I look like his batshit crazy first wife. As a kid, my mom had this friend who would buy her a box of chocolate-covered cherries every single Christmas. Every single Christmas, my mother would open this box of chocolate-covered cherries with the biggest smile on her face, and she would be like, I'm so excited to eat these after dinner tonight. And then she would put them away, and after dinner, she would pull them back out, and she would give them to me and my siblings because my mother hated chocolate-covered cherries. And this went on for a very long time, and finally, after like 7 years of it, I asked my mom, why do you not just tell her you don't like chocolate-covered cherries so that she can stop buying them for you? And my mom explained to me that her friend came to her right after her father had passed away, and she was having a meltdown because it was right around Christmas time, and she always bought her father a box of chocolate-covered cherries for Christmas, and now she had nobody to buy these chocolate-covered cherries for anymore. What was she going to do? Because she couldn't buy chocolate-covered cherries. And so my mom lied and pretended that she liked chocolate-covered cherries so her friend would have somebody to buy those cherries for so that she didn't have to break her tradition, so that she didn't get sad every year around Christmas time when she couldn't buy the chocolate-covered cherries. And I remember thinking that was so silly because why did she need an excuse or a reason to buy these chocolate-covered cherries? And then on Sunday, my dad got killed. And last night, I went to go buy a box of chips for my pantry. And I always buy the same box of variety pack chips because my kids like 4 of the 5 bags of chips that are in there. And I am so against food waste, but it's okay because the 5th bag of chips is Fritos, which is my dad's favorite type of chip. And so I would always just bag them up and I would give them to my mother, and my mother would pack them in my dad's lunch every single day so that they didn't go to waste. But now my dad is gone and I have gone full circle and turned into the chocolate cherry lady. My aunt's husband killed himself in a mall parking lot, and it became the family tragedy for a while because my grandma had just killed herself in a hotel like 3 months before that, and my aunt was quite young and they had a toddler-aged son together, so it left her as a young widow trying to raise a baby on her own. But luckily she ended up reconnecting with her high school sweetheart, and they got married, and he helped her raise her baby, and they stayed married up until he died. Now my Uncle Jim, that's what I called him, he died from a genetic form of cancer, and it was very aggressive and very rare. So when he first got diagnosed, they told him he needed to tell his family so that they could get checked for it. Luckily, he didn't have that much family left alive, but he did have a twin brother. So he told his twin brother to go get tested. He did. He tested positive. And then my aunt went to my cousin and was like, hey, you need to go get tested for this. And my cousin was like, why? That's my stepdad. That's not how genetics work. And then my aunt had to confess that in fact was not his stepdad. That was his biological dad, because when my Uncle Jim came home on a military leave, my aunt had an affair on her first husband with him, and she got pregnant, and she just decided not to tell anybody. So her first husband died not knowing that his son was in fact not his son. And then my Uncle Jim ended up raising his biological son as if it was his stepson for like 20 something years. And then when he found out the truth, he still stayed with my aunt. He did not leave. He stayed with that woman until the day he died. My grandma killed herself. My grandpa decided to just buy a full family plot instead of one because it was a better investment. We come from a very tight-knit family, and he decided he wanted his family together even in death. Now, the problem with this is that when he passed away, we were having a ton of family drama because my uncle had killed him and then tried to frame my mom, and then he was in prison looking at the death penalty, so my mom was going to have to not only deal with their father's body, but also deal with her brother's body, and she obviously couldn't put them together in the family plot because that was going to create some cemetery drama, and so she had to think outside the box and come up with an alternate solution. And what she decided decided that she was going to do was she was going to put my uncle in the family plot with my grandmother, and then she was going to cremate my grandfather, and she was going to keep his ashes with her. That way they each got to keep a parent with them, right? And so my mom has my grandpa cremated, then she has my grandpa's funeral, and then at the end of my grandpa's funeral, they decide that they're going to do a motorcycle run around the Capitol because my grandfather ran a motorcycle club. And so my mom and my dad get on the very first motorcycle in front of everybody, and then there's hundreds of other people on motorcycles behind them. And they're going around the Capitol, and they're mid-run when my mother comes up with this brilliant idea. And she stands up on the back of the motorcycle, and she turns around, and she looks at everybody, and then she opens the urn that contains my granddaddy's ashes, and they all go flying out at everybody's faces. And that day, hundreds of people ate my grandpa for dinner. Her great-grandma was declared insane at a pretty young age, and then through the majority of her adult life, she was in and out of the insane asylum. The majority of the time she was out, it was because she was pregnant or right after she had a baby, so she kept having children so that she could stay out of the asylum. She ended up making it to 36 and pregnant with her 9th baby before she decided, you know what, enough is enough, I don't want to do this anymore. And so then she tried to cut that baby out of her, and unfortunately they were unable to save her and she bled out, but luckily they did save that baby. And my great-grandma Eva, which was her daughter, she grew up to then blow her own brains out, but luckily before she did that, she had 2 daughters of her own. My great-aunt Barbara, who killed herself with carbon monoxide poisoning, and my grandma Dolly, who at 34 was like, you know what, I feel like my thoughts are not right, I should seek assistance. So she went, she got put on antidepressants and antipsychotics, which she then used to kill herself 10 days later. But luckily before she did that, she had 2 kids of her own. My uncle Stephen, who at 18 years old killed my grandfather, not entirely related though, and then my mother Patty, who is the first woman in that generational line of mine to make it over the age of 50 in over 100 years. She's very proud of herself for breaking that generational suicide trend that they had going on in that family line, and she started watching me exhibit those symptoms at a very young age, so I have been in treatment for it since I was about 12 years old, and she's been very vocal about the fact that she broke that cycle. There is no longer a cycle of suicide in her family for me to continue. And then last year on my birthday, my dad got in this huge fight with his ex-wife and decided to kill himself, so his final birthday gift to me was giving me the opportunity to create a new cycle under him. A video about my grandma's asses in a museum. Unintentionally, it's not supposed to be in there. Definitely an accident on the museum's end, but my grandma's ass and titties are absolutely on display in that museum, and they're not supposed to be because my grandfather is actually the one who's featured in there, not her. He was inducted into that museum, but they have like this section where they have a biography about him and his photo, and the photo that they chose of him is a photo that I had literally never even seen before. I don't know where they got that photo, but he's standing at the Capitol giving a speech, and he has on his cut these 2 giant buttons. My grandma actually had them made for him, and they take up probably the majority of the left side of his cut. And the top one is my grandma with no clothes on, bending down, her ass is out, and then the second one is my grandma on a motorcycle with no clothes on, so tits in your face. And that is the picture that they chose for my grandpa, not realizing that if you look close enough, they actually have my grandma's ass and titties on display in their museum, and everybody was commenting on it and going to go look at the photo, which is hilarious. My grandmother would love this. My grandmother would be so proud that my grandfather got featured in a museum and that he brought her ass and titties along with him into the museum. And people were commenting like, oh no, the museum's gonna find out now and they're gonna take down the picture. And then yesterday somebody commented and was like, well, it happened. The museum took down the picture and put up just a picture of his face. And then today the museum commented on that video and they responded to the comment saying they took down the photo, and they were like, no, you're looking in the wrong section. If you want to see that full photo, you have to go to the 2002 inductees section. So instead of removing my grandma's ass and titties from their museum, they just told everybody how to find them.